Hey y'all, today's video is going to be a good one. I have convinced my dad to share his famous dressing recipe. He makes this every Thanksgiving and Christmas, and it just wouldn't feel like a holiday if this wasn't on the table. It is a staple. He makes it absolutely perfect. I'm telling y'all, with 100% honesty, I have never had a better dressing than my dad's. Nothing else compares. So I wanted a whole video dedicated to it, and he is happy to share this recipe with all of you. The first thing that you're going to want to do is bake up some cornbread. He made this one the day before because for dressing, you always want to use 1 to 2 day old cornbread.
I always use Martha White cornmeal mix and white lily flour. And Mom's always said that's important.
He baked up another batch to show you guys how he makes his cornbread, and he typically doesn't measure anything, but for the purpose of this video, he's pulling out the measuring cups. But I left in that little clip of him talking about the certain brands that he uses. He's big on that. He's always only bought the white lily flour and the Martha White cornmeal mix. So he's using 2.5 cups of the cornmeal mix, and he's using about 1/4 cup of that flour. He did say that that's optional, but he always likes to add it. Now here he said that he is taking the back of his spoon and he is working out the little clumps in the flour. You could use a sifter if you wanted to. I've never seen him use one. His spoon works just fine, and once he kind of works it out the way that he wants to, he just stirs it really good before he starts adding anything in. He is going to be using buttermilk. We both agree that you don't have to have it. You could use regular milk, but buttermilk makes the absolute best cornbread. And it is one of those things that you can't really measure. You do pretty much just have to kind of eyeball it until you get to the consistency that you're looking for. He also likes to use 1 egg, just your standard large size egg. And he's just going to start pouring in the buttermilk a little at a time until he gets the consistency that he wants. So, you know, everyone has their preference, but you don't want it to be too thick and you don't want it to be as thin as like a pancake batter. So just somewhere in the middle, and the more that you make it, the easier it will be to just go by looking at it and you'll know it's ready. So he's going to heat up his cast iron skillet on the stove, and he's going to heat up some olive oil in the skillet. He's also adding about 1 tablespoon of that olive oil to the cornbread mix. Now, most of the time he doesn't use olive oil, he uses bacon grease, but he didn't have it this day. So on those occasions where he doesn't have bacon grease, he'll just substitute it for olive oil. So you can use either or, and it doesn't even have to be olive oil. It can be any oil you have on hand. Now that that oil is nice and hot, he is just going to pour all of the cornbread mix into the pan, and you can see that the oil is kind of bubbling around the edges. The cornbread is starting to kind of curl up. That's exactly what you want. He's going to bake that in the oven at 400 degrees for about 30 minutes. So it's done. As you can see, it is nice and golden brown on top. He said especially for dressing, you want to get it out of the pan quick because it can continue to cook it and get it too brown on the bottom, and it just won't work well in a dressing. So that is all there is to his cornbread. So moving on to the next step, he has already went ahead and chopped up some vegetables. So we have about 1 cup of diced celery and 1 cup of diced onions. And he is going to be cooking these veggies down in some chicken broth so that they will be nice and soft throughout the dressing. He said that Swanson makes the best chicken broth, so that's what he is using. He's opening it up the old school way. He has got 2 separate pots over here on the stove, and if you have watched any of my videos in the past, you know that I don't eat onions. So keep that in mind. You can cook the celery and onions together. He is only doing this because of me. Every year for Thanksgiving and Christmas, he makes me my own little portion of dressing without onions. I have never asked him to do that. I tell him he doesn't have to, but year after year, he still does it. So if you have anyone allergic to onions in your family or just an extremely picky eater, this is a nice visual on how you can do it. So basically, he just covered the veggies with enough chicken broth to cover it, and he is just going to let those simmer away until they are really tender. So meanwhile, we're going to go ahead and mix up the dry ingredients. So he likes to use the Pepperidge Farm herb seasoned cube stuffing and the herb seasoned classic stuffing. And here he was just talking about how he typically, if he's doing this for like a big event or, more people, he uses a half a bag each. But for the portion that we are showing you today, he is measuring out 2 cups each. So 4 cups total, just using the 2 different bags.
I used 4 cans of this, and I boiled 2 chicken breasts and 2 thighs the day before.
You're going to need some chicken broth to soak into your croutons that we just added to the bowl, and also you'll need it to soak throughout the cornbread, which we'll show here in a little bit. But I wanted to leave in that clip of my dad telling y'all how he accumulated this big bowl of chicken broth. So like he said, he used 4 cans of chicken broth, and he cooked 2 chicken breasts and 2 chicken thighs in it to make it extra rich. And whatever broth is left over, he will use it to make dumplings, and of course he'll add that chicken to it that he cooked in the broth. So we're gonna have chicken and dumplings with this dressing. But as you've seen, he added about 3 cups to start with of the chicken broth, and he said he's taking the back of his spoon to kind of mash that up better so there's not like big chunks of it in there. And he let that soak for a few minutes before he started to add the cornbread. So that's what he's doing here. He's going to use all of that cornbread that he baked up the day before, and he's just going to go in with his hands and crumble it up as fine as he can. Next, you are going to need to grab you some ground sage. In my opinion, I feel like this is the most important ingredient in the dressing because it is what makes it so good. And he uses a lot of sage in his, which I just love. It is not overpowering at all. And throughout the years, he has learned that exactly about half of a bottle of the ground sage is the perfect amount seasoning wise for his dressing. But again, for video purposes, he is pulling out the measuring spoons, and he started off with about 3 tablespoons of the ground sage. And once he gets everything mixed, we'll do a little taste test here in a bit to see if it needs more. But we're starting off with the 3 tablespoons. So now that he got that incorporated, he's going to take about 2 cups of that chicken broth that he has sitting there, and he is going to add that on into the bowl now that the cornbread has been added. He is also going to add in 1 can of cream of chicken soup. He did say that you can substitute it for cream of celery if you want to. And he said that this just helps keep everything together. It makes it slice up better, and it also helps keep everything nice and moist. You definitely do not want a dry dressing. There's nothing worse. He said that he learned that trick to add the cream of chicken soup to dressing from his mom, and he said that he is the only one that remembers her adding that in there, and that all of his siblings swear that she did not add it. So that's how he always does it. And if you caught that, he did end up adding in the rest of the cornbread to make it stretch further. He mixed it in, and he said that that looks perfect. So he's going to grab 2 little tasting spoons, and we're going to see if it needs more sage.
A little bit more. I usually use exactly half.
Yeah, so about 4 tablespoons, maybe 5.
Yeah.
So after we both did the taste test, we both agreed that it needed more sage, so he added another tablespoon. So there's 4 tablespoons total in the dressing.
What I've done right here, put it in the refrigerator and let it sit overnight, bake it the next day.
Yeah.
Me,
better?
it's better. I don't know.
He was telling me that if you want it to save some time, you can mix all of this together the night before, and then you can pull it out and bake it the day of your dinner. And as it sits overnight, all of those flavors get even better. But either way you do it, it is still going to turn out delicious. So now he's going to go ahead and add on in the cooked celery first. He said mix it very well so that all of the celery doesn't kind of just clump up into one section versus mixed all throughout. But he's just starting with the celery because, again, he doesn't want to put the onions in my portion. So he's just adding mine to this little loaf pan, and he's just using the back of his spoon to smooth it out. And mine is ready to go in the oven. So now for everyone else, he has taken those onions that he cooked up on the stove and adding those on in and mixing it together good. He was telling me that he knows that I don't like onions, but to him, the cooked onions and dressing is what makes it so good. And I'm sure that a lot of you guys would agree with him. So he's dumping that on out into the casserole dish, and again, just smoothing that out real good. And he did say that the thickness of dressing matters, that you don't want it to be like overly thick. So I'm going to give y'all a little close up of what the dressing should look like before it goes into the oven. He does have the oven preheated to 350 degrees, and now he's going to go ahead and stick both of those on in there. He's going to end up baking his anywhere from 30 to 35 minutes. You definitely want to keep an eye on it because everyone's oven is different. But basically, you're just looking for the tops to get golden brown. You want the edges to be a little bit crispy, and you don't want it to be like overly jiggly in the middle or anything like that. But these do cook up pretty quickly, and the dressing is ready to be served. I think this looks absolutely perfect, exactly what a southern dressing should look like. His recipe is the best, I promise you. So I did go ahead and cut up a slice to show you guys kind of what the inside looks like once it's cooked up. I did cut out of the one with the onions in it, but as you can see, it is not dry at all. I really hope that if any of you guys try out this recipe, you'll come back to the video and let us know how you liked it. Like I said, he served it alongside some chicken and dumplings and a few other sides. This was just a regular Tuesday night dinner, and it was so good. But I hope that this video was helpful to anyone wanting to attempt making homemade dressing, and I want to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving from my family to yours.